Okay, so let's get started. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Katie. I'm the content lead at GovernorHub. I am really pleased to be hosting this webinar today alongside our guests from Ofsted, Helen Matthews and Claire Stewart. Helen is Deputy Director of Inspection Improvement and Claire is Deputy Director of Inclusive Education. Helen and Claire will take us through the new inspection areas and report cards, and they'll let us know what a strong standard means in practice and how the new framework impacts governance. And I'll then put some of your questions to Helen and Claire so that you can get the answers you need straight from the people who helped to shape the new framework. I know you're all really busy, so I just wanted to start by saying a massive thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us. We've got a really fab session lined up and I'm excited to get started. But before we do dive in, just a tiny bit of housekeeping we need to cover off as well. Since we have such a big group of you today, the chat function is actually turned off, but we would still love to hear your questions. Please use the Q&A feature. You can find that down at the bottom of your screen. It has a little question mark and you can submit your questions there. And you can also upvote questions there with a thumbs up. So if you see one already that you would really like to have answered, we will prioritise those ones when we get to putting your questions to Helen and Claire afterwards. So please make use of that function to help you get the most out of this. Also, bear in mind not to use any people names or identifying information in there if you do submit questions. And we are going to stay focused on questions for our Ofsted guests today. So if you do have any questions or problems about the GovernorHub platform, please just email us on support@governorhub.com and we'll get back to you about those later. Also, I know many of you will want to revisit today's session, so don't worry, the slide and the recording will be sent out by email tomorrow. And if you do run into any tech issues, there are a few fixes that you can try on the slide here, but if all else fails, as I mentioned, don't worry, you will still get the full recording tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Helen and Claire, and let's get going.
Thank you very much for having us today. If we could just move on to the Ofsted slides, that would be really great. Yeah, Helen and I are really pleased to be here with you today to talk about our renewed approach to education inspection and the new framework and toolkits that have been published for a little while now. So thank you very much for having us. We will try to pick up some of your questions as we're going as well, you know, if we can kind of weave them in through the slides. And we have had some pre-submitted, which we'll come to at the end. And, you know, if we can sort of type answers to some of them as we're going, then we'll try and do that as much as we can as well. What Helen and I will do is just turn our cameras off while we're presenting, just so that we can all focus on the content, and then we'll pop them back on at the end for Q&A. And I should just say, you can probably hear I'm struggling a bit with my voice. I'm hoping it's going to hold out, but you'll have to forgive my slightly croakiness. So if we just move on to the first proper slide then, please. Thank you very much. So each one of us has a desire to work for all pupils, children and learners, apprentices and trainees to receive a high quality of education and training, an education that enables everyone to achieve, belong and thrive. And of course, to achieve great outcomes. This is about raising standards. As we know, children get one childhood and we will continue to put them first. We want great outcomes for all our children. And as you've probably heard Sir Martin Oliver say, and we all believe this, if we get it right for the most vulnerable, we get it right for all. For the first time, inclusion will be the focus on every inspection. Parents have told us that they want better and more detailed information about where their child's school, nursery or college have strengths and where they have areas for improvement. We want to celebrate a school's strengths, validate what leaders are telling us about their school, and work with those leaders to highlight what needs developing further. We remain committed to improving how it feels to be inspected, while continuing to encourage and support providers to raise standards. We don't expect any provider or school to be doing more than it needs to just for Ofsted. The inspection toolkit that will be used to evaluate the standards in schools is based on statutory duties and guidance, non-statutory guidance, professional standards, research and inspection evidence. And of course, we're committed to working with leaders to determine the areas of inspection focus and to agree the most appropriate activities on inspection tailored to the specific provider. Leadership is a thread which also runs through all of our evaluation areas, and we know that effective governance is critical in ensuring that schools provide high quality education and care, and in particular for those most vulnerable pupils. So if we could just move on, please. So let's have a little look in more detail at our new approach and what this means for governance. And if we just go to the next slide. Thank you. We will put children first, breaking down barriers by raising standards, especially for the most disadvantaged and vulnerable pupils. We've introduced a new inclusion evaluation area, and inspectors will evaluate a school's provision for the most vulnerable pupils in its care in every evaluation area as well. We've woven it through all of those other evaluation areas. We'll improve the way that we report the content of inspection findings to parents and carers. This is why we've introduced a new report card. It's easily accessible, including on mobile devices. And that report card will set out our new 5-point grading scale to set high expectations while encouraging improvement where it's needed. Those grades are urgent improvement, needs attention, expected standard, strong standard, exceptional. And that exceptional is to identify that very best provision in the country. In a change from the initial proposals that we went out in our consultation, providers will not be expected to submit case studies for approval for exceptional. Instead, inspectors will evaluate exceptional practice by applying the toolkit, subject to the usual quality assurance and consistency checking. We'll also improve the look and feel of inspection for education providers and professionals with a more collaborative approach. We've added an additional inspector, allowing the lead inspector to spend more time with leaders, including any nominee, as well as overseeing and quality assuring the inspection. We'll maintain our focus on having care and concern for the well-being and workload of those we inspect. Our inspection methodology has been designed to reduce workload for the education workforce. The toolkit assesses the professional standards, statutory and non-statutory requirements already placed on schools. We will evaluate schools' work to support and promote leaders' and staff's well-being. This will be considered as part of the leadership and governance evaluation area. It's something that inspectors will want to speak with you about. Then if we just look at the bottom row there, we will take more context into greater account on inspection, something that we make clear in our new operating guide for inspectors. We'll make inspections consistent in approach. Almost all school inspections will be led by one of His Majesty's inspectors. And in addition, we continue to improve our process for allowing leaders to raise any issues about their inspection. We will provide constructive advice to improve based on conversations with leaders. And in doing so, we'll highlight any priorities for improvement, including some that may not already be on leaders and governors' radar. And finally, we've further tailored our inspection approach to each remit and provision type within them. So we've worked to align regulation and inspection standards in early years so that they're different by design. And then if we could just move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. And let's just talk a little bit more about inclusion then. As we said, we've really strengthened our approach to inclusion. And I quoted him once already, I'll quote him again. As Sir Martin Oliver stated, if we get it right for the most vulnerable, we'll get it right for all. We will put children first, breaking down barriers by raising standards, especially for the disadvantaged and vulnerable pupils. This is why we've introduced that separate inclusion evaluation area, and inclusion is also a key theme across all the other evaluation areas. We'll always start with those that the government asks providers to focus on, whether that's through schools' statutory obligations or non-statutory guidance. That's why we're particularly emphasising those from socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds, those with SEND, and those known or previously known to children's social care. We'll also evaluate how well schools ensure that there's high quality support for all children and learners who may face other barriers to their learning and or well-being. As part of understanding the barriers most relevant to a school, inspectors will make use of the demographic data to understand a school's cohort, But crucially, they'll speak with leaders to understand the context in which the school is working and the particular barriers their pupils face. When we meet with those who have responsibility for governance, we'll want to understand how you assure yourselves that the school provides well for all pupils, including the most vulnerable. If we move on to the next slide, please. So we've reduced the number of evaluation areas from those that we initially proposed as part of the toolkit in our consultation. The evaluation areas are now those that you see on screen. You'll see that attendance and behaviour now form one evaluation area, and that curriculum and teaching also form one evaluation area. You'll also see that there's an evaluation area that specifically covers leadership and governance. At the start of this evaluation area, we make clear that we will consider whether leaders and those responsible for governance collectively ensure that the school's provision enables every pupil to thrive, whether they're benefiting from the right systems, processes, and levels of oversight, so that they're kept safe and able to flourish whatever their backgrounds or individual needs. We'll also consider the commitment of leaders and those responsible for governance to raising standards of education and care to improve the lives of all pupils, especially those who are disadvantaged, those with SEND, those who are known or previously known to children's social care. However, leadership is a thread which runs through all of our evaluation areas, and we touch on this later in this webinar. If we could move on, please. So let's think a little bit about how inspections will look and feel different. It's our intention that they'll look and feel different right from the planning call, where we'll work collaboratively with leaders to understand the school's context and to tailor activities for inspection that help us celebrate those school strengths, validate leaders' priorities and progress, and highlight where improvement is needed. We'll have a values-driven approach to inspections, that which is professional, empathetic, respectful, and courteous. Inspections carried out by inspectors who've undergone the largest package of training Ofsted has ever offered for an inspection launch to inspectors, alongside webinars like these and events for education professionals. And then if we just move on to the slide about the toolkits. And then just again, please. Thank you. So our toolkit shows providers and inspectors the evaluation areas that we'll focus on, and within them, the standards we will evaluate to inform grading. As we said earlier, the inspection toolkit is based on statutory duties and non-statutory guidance, professional standards, research, and inspection evidence. The toolkit is not a checklist. It is used to guide conversations, reflect on evidence, and make sure grades reflect the evidence gathered. It supports a shared understanding and discussion of the strengths of the school's work, its context, and areas for further exploration. Inspectors will apply the toolkit evaluation areas, themes, and standards, tailoring activities to each school's context. As we've said, nothing in the standards set out in the toolkits should add to a school's workload, nor do we expect schools to have completed any formal self-evaluation. However, it is helpful for you as governors to be aware of the toolkit and how the school you work with may use it to support continuing improvement, and we'll expect leaders to share their strengths, successes, and priorities with us. We've carefully reflected on evaluation areas in our consultation and how these should apply for different remits and provision types. We'll talk through this in more detail when we come to what changes mean for governance. Then if we just move on, we'll have a little look at report cards. If we just go one more slide, please. Thank you. Before we consider what all of this means in more detail for governance, let's turn finally to our report cards. The renewed report card is bringing together the most popular preferences of parents and professionals by combining separate grades, rating scales, and short summaries into new report cards. The narrative gives a detailed picture of performance, while the 5-point scale offers the clarity and simplicity that parents asked for. We'll publish data alongside the inspection report card to illustrate the provider and learner contexts, and performance and attendance data over time, which will be used to inform evaluation grades. The data will differ for each remit, but will be displayed in a consistent design. So, at the end of the inspection, the lead inspector will write a report card which will reflect the evidence gathered, Be clear, concise, and focused on what matters most as informed by the school's context, leaders' evaluation of their school, and the toolkit. Explain the grade given for each evaluation area. Make clear what the school should improve. Be consistent with the verbal feedback given to the school at the end of the inspection. The key message here is that the report card will really capture the most notable features of the school and do so in a way that is truly reflective of the school and its context. And then I'll just talk you through the timeline for change. So we have resumed routine inspections under the renewed framework from November as planned. And during this period, we are maintaining urgent inspection and regulatory activity in schools, early years, and further education and skills providers. We've also conducted a series of pilot inspections, which have given inspectors the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of the approach in practice. And we're sort of a couple of weeks, aren't we, into those resumed inspections. For independent schools, standard inspections are continuing throughout the first half of this autumn term, or they have continued, to ensure that all schools receive their standard inspection within the current cycle, which began in January 2023. Additional inspections of independent schools also continue because they're commissioned by the DfE. Then standard inspections for non-association independent schools under the renewed framework will then begin in January 2026. So if we just click over to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Helen now, who will take you through a bit more about what those changes mean for governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire, and I'm glad your voice held out for you for that part of the presentation. So I'm going to take you through some slides now, colleagues, to just discuss with you really what this means for you. And one of the questions that I've seen in the chat is about where you can access the toolkit. So could we move on to the next slide, please? That would be helpful. Thank you. So the toolkit, if you go onto an internet search and just put in Ofsted inspection toolkit, you'll find all the documents that you need there. We've mentioned that the toolkit that will be used on inspections to guide conversations and help evaluate different aspects of a school's work and to inform how we might determine those grades. So on the screen, you can see an example of a covering page for the evaluation area, leadership and governance in this case. And every evaluation area has a section set out like this, which is designed to help schools and inspectors see at a glance what the evaluation area is about. And it sets out the most significant factors that underpin our approaches to evidence gathering and grading. Now, our leadership and governance evaluation area will clearly consider the impact of governance. And as part of the key factors to this, inspectors will gather evidence relating to how those responsible for governance understand their respective roles and their performance in these roles in a way that enhances the school's effectiveness. We will also consider how the responsible body takes into account the workload and well-being of leaders and staff. Now, we know that how governors and trustees carry out their functions, including how they support and shape the school's vision, ethos, and strategic direction, can have a really significant impact on the day-to-day decisions in the school. Inspectors will meet with those responsible for governance face-to-face or on a call, whichever works best. In an academy, the Board of Trustees is responsible for governance. Where there is a governance professional for the Trust Board, inspectors may wish to speak to them. And this professional must be spoken with if it will usually clarify points for inspectors about the governance structure, add to the evidence, and or the trust wish inspectors to speak to a trustee and the governance professional. These meetings should usually take place without the school and trust leaders present. The covering page for leadership and governance evaluation area explains that inspectors will be considering the commitment to raise standards, a clear and strategic approach to improvement, assurance that decisions are being taken in the best interests of pupils, and that there is coherent professional learning programme in place for all staff. We will also consider engagement with parents and the school community. Leadership is a thread which runs throughout all of the different evaluation areas. So, for example, on the curriculum and teaching covering page, it makes clear that inspectors will consider how effectively leaders ensure that pupils build strong foundations for accessing the curriculum or for later success. In the attendance and behaviour evaluation area, whether leaders create a calm, orderly, respectful, supportive and positive environment in which pupils can thrive. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? Thank you. Each evaluation area, including the leadership and governance evaluation area, then outlines a further summary of what will be considered for different ages, phases, and provision types. And I know some of the questions in the chat have covered what it means for me in my particular setting. As we've already mentioned, inspectors will be keen to understand the school's context and how this may have influenced leaders, including governors, decision-making. Inspectors will also want to understand the governance structure of your school. And this helps us to ensure that we speak with the most appropriate people as we seek to celebrate, validate, and highlight the work of the school. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? And once we have set out what an evaluation area covers, the toolkit then moves into much more detail about the kinds of evidence inspectors will gather. Each evaluation area considers themes, as you can see on the slide, and below that, prompts that guide inspectors' conversations and observations. Evaluation areas typically start with the theme of strategic leadership. These prompts are not a checklist for schools or governors. They're there to help inspectors think about the right questions, to explore evidence in context, and to make sure that our evaluations are consistent and fair. Now, governance is a distinct theme in the leadership and governance evaluation area. And in gathering evidence about effective governance, we will be considering the extent to which governors or trustees are knowledgeable about their statutory duties and carry them out effectively, support and challenge the school's leaders effectively, using the best methods to assure themselves of the quality and impact of different aspects of the school's work, understand their role as the responsible body where applicable in considering and addressing leaders' workload and well-being. Assure themselves that leaders have an accurate understanding of the school's context and are prioritising the actions for improvement that will have the greatest impact on pupils. Ensure that systems for monitoring and quality assurance are fair, valid and constructive, and provide leaders and staff with high quality feedback to inform continuous improvement. Hold leaders to account appropriately and effectively for the impact of the school's professional learning programme for staff. Hold leaders to account appropriately and effectively for the school's support and provision for disadvantaged pupils, those with SEND, those who are known or previously known to children's social care. The detail in each theme has been carefully considered and is underpinned by research and statute. And this provides clarity to ensure that the toolkit makes inspection transparent. Leaders, including governors, can see the themes inspectors will explore in their meetings or conversations and the types of questions that will help shape their evidence gathering. Okay. As we come to the next section of the toolkit, we can see that each evaluation area is graded on a 5-point scale. This is with the exception of safeguarding, which is either met or not met. And what you can see here are the grades we expect to see most often on inspection. In the amber, you can see needs attention in the left-hand column. In the middle, expected standard. And in the dark green on the right-hand side, strong standard. The expected standard in the middle, and this is the baseline for every inspection. It reflects what is required of schools, and it is the starting point for all inspections. And that's why it's in the centre of the page. We start each inspection with the premise that a school is meeting the expected standard. That's the column in the middle with the green. Within the expected standard, this considers how governors and trustees ensure that the vision, ethos, and strategic direction of the school are clearly defined, take account of context, and make sure that the resources, including digital technologies, are used effectively. As part of this, we will explore the typical support and challenge for leaders and how governors pay due regard to leaders and staff well-being and their workload. We will also consider how leaders and governors develop constructive relationships with all parents, carers, and with the wider community to support pupils achieve and feel a sense of belonging in their school. Importantly, one clear distinction is that we will be looking for a secure fit, not a best fit as we did previously. That is, to meet the expected standard, a school will need to meet all of the standards in that column. And to meet the strong standard, a school will need to meet all the standards in expected and all the standards in strong. You will see words such as typically and generally in the middle column in the expected standard. And this is to recognise that the expected standard is not about perfection. For example, a school might have a subject area that is being developed well, but does not yet quite meet the same standards as others consistently. And if that was the case, the school may still be graded as having a secure fit with the expected standards in the relevant evaluation area. The needs attention column on the left in the orange contains indicators and not standards. An evaluation area is likely to be graded as needs attention when there is not a secure fit for the expected standard. The indicators in this column are designed to exemplify why a school is not meeting those expected standards. These indicators are deliberately worded positively to acknowledge that leaders are doing what leaders are doing, but pointing out where something needs attention as this is not a secure fit with the expected standard. We have said all along that we expect more schools to have varied grade profiles, including potentially some areas that need attention. Sir Martin Oliver has often referenced the need for nuanced grading, stating that grades for specific evaluation areas will allow for a more detailed and representative assessment of a school. Individual grading of the evaluation areas will enable parents and carers to be able to see in much more detail what's special about the school, what it does well, and what you, governors and leaders, are working on. As Lee Austin, our National Director, has stated, needs attention is not a fail. It's a bit like if you take your car to an MOT and it passes, but it gets an advisory notice. If you don't pay attention to this, this could be a problem in the future. Okay, move on to the next slide. Thank you. Now, on the previous slide, we looked at the grades that inspectors will use the most often. And here we're focusing on the two ends of the scale that we expect to use much less frequently: urgent improvement in the red and exceptional in the dark blue. Now, urgent improvement applies when the expected standards in that evaluation area have clearly not been met, and where there are serious concerns about the impact of the school's work in the relevant evaluation area. Now, the indicators explain what this might look like in practice. And these are occasions when significant improvement is needed. At the other end of the scale is exceptional. And this grade is for schools where the evidence shows that standards are not only strong, but truly transformational. That means everything in the strong standard is already being met securely, consistently over time, and leaders are making a sustained difference for all pupils, and that's every pupil within the school. Both urgent improvement and exceptional are important parts of the 5-part scale, but they will be much less common in practice. The majority of evaluations will fall into those middle 3 grades that we looked at earlier. Okay, let's move on. In summary, colleagues, leadership, like inclusion, runs through all the evaluations, as we know that effective leadership, including governance, is essential to the successful work of schools. We have spoken today about the evidence gathering prompts in the toolkit, which will guide inspectors. Our leadership and governance evaluation specifically considers the extent to which governors are knowledgeable about their duties and role, as well as the extent to which they support, challenge, and hold leaders to account. Ultimately, we want to understand how those responsible for governance collectively ensure that the school's provision enables every pupil to thrive, and the commitment to raising standards of education and care to improve the lives of all pupils, particularly those who are disadvantaged, those with SEND, those who are known or previously known to children's social care, and all of those who may face other barriers to their learning or their well-being. Our inspections will look and feel different. Professional dialogue is central to our renewed inspection approach. That includes professional dialogue with those responsible for governance. Inspectors will meet with those responsible for governance, including the chair or equivalent. And of course, governors will be welcome to attend the final feedback at the end of the inspection, in which inspectors will set out the inspection findings, including celebrating what the school does particularly well, validating what leaders have told us about their priorities, and highlighting where there may be more to do. We hope today's succession has been helpful, and we would strongly encourage you to have a look at our in-school inspection toolkit online. You will find there's 3 documents when you find the toolkit. There's the actual school inspection toolkit, which will give you greater understanding of what we've discussed today. There's also an operating guide, which explains what the basis of the inspection will look like, so the sorts of meetings that we have, how it will be conducted, and a further information leaflet or document which takes you through some of the questions that you might still have. If we move on to the next slide, I think there's a helpful QR code. Yep, there we go. So this, if we turn to questions, this is a link. So if you want to, hopefully this will work. And this gives you the formal response to the consultation, the toolkits for all the remits that we're currently inspecting, and the supporting research and evidence. We've also done some bespoke webinars for different types of settings, primary schools, secondary, specials, and you can find recordings of these on our YouTube channel or by scanning this QR code. So a lot of scanning of QR codes there, colleagues, but we're going to come back, I think, into the room now for some questions.
Hello, yes, we are going to come back and we're going to start. with some of the questions that some of you here submitted in advance when you signed up. And I'm really glad to say that I've been keeping an eye on the Q&A, and some of these pre-submitted questions do reflect the ones that have been popular live in the Q&A as well. So hopefully we'll cover off some of your most burning questions now. But I think it's good to start with this first one, which is focusing on the healthier inspection culture that you're telling us about. A member has asked what steps Ofsted is taking to ensure that inspection processes don't inadvertently cause unnecessary workload or pressure for leaders and teachers, and how governors can support that healthier inspection culture.
Thanks, Katie. I'll take that one. And yeah, I've just been sort of starting writing answers to some questions, thinking, oh, I'm going to cover that in a minute. I'm going to cover that in a minute. So hopefully we'll be able to give some good answers for you. So we've been really candid, haven't we, about our intention to sort of try and dial down that pressure felt by leaders on inspection. We do recognise that it is a pressured, stressful thing. You know, we've been school leaders ourselves. We know what it feels like to be inspected. We want to do everything we can to kind of minimise that. Our approach to inspection under the renewed education inspection framework really tries to focus on that real day-to-day life of a school. So we're not expecting to see anything additional beyond what leaders and staff are doing anyway, day in and day out, to support their pupils. And as we said in our kind of presentation, that expected standard throughout the toolkits is really based on the expectations which are already placed on schools. And that's statutory guidance and duties, non-statutory guidance and professional standards, and some research as well. So we're really trying to focus on what are the things that you would be expected to do to provide a good education for children and young people. And we've also introduced that role of nominee, which is something that we've had in further education and skills for a while. We've brought into all of our inspections. And that's a person who can kind of act as a representative for leaders and a bit of a kind of conduit, I suppose, and can kind of be involved in the inspection. And the early signs, you know, from our pilots and from the early inspections that we've been doing is that that's been really popular and really helpful. What I would say is we would probably recommend it can be whoever the school thinks is most appropriate. We have seen some schools that they've had it be the head teacher, and we would probably say that might not be the best person to have for that role, but obviously that is up to the school. One thing that we've built into the methodology as well is frequent reflection meetings. So there's no kind of big reveal at the end of the inspection. There's no kind of stressed, which way is this going to go? It's including leaders and governors throughout the process, so that inspectors are having those reflection meetings and actually communicating, well, we're thinking this, we've seen this, you know, is there any more evidence of this? And kind of trying to bring people along with that professional dialogue throughout. And then leadership is a thread which runs through all of those evaluation areas. And we know that effective governance is really critical in ensuring that schools provide high quality education and care, and in particular for those most vulnerable pupils. So that leadership and governance evaluation area specifically looks at the impact of governance, and then leadership is woven throughout as well. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour of the ways that we're trying to kind of, you know, mitigate and dial down that pressure.
Thank you for that really good answer, Claire. And another one, this is the next one, I think is also kind of reared up a little bit in the Q&A as well, just kind of speaking to that taking schools' context into account point. Can you explain at all what inspections might look like in more non-standard settings, in particular maybe special schools, alternative to provisions, or very small schools? Is there anything about the kind of activities and considerations that inspectors will take part in that will be different in those settings?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. I'll take that question. Before I do, there's been quite a few people in the chat have said that they don't understand how to use the QR codes or haven't got phones that will access the QR codes. If you just Google Ofsted Inspection Toolkit, it will come straight up with all of the documents that were relevant to those QR codes. I don't want anyone to feel that they're not permitted to get to them. So we've given a huge amount of thought to different types of settings, because obviously our renewed framework covers the full remit, full educational remits across all different things, from sort of childminders to very large secondary schools to big colleges to alternative provision with perhaps 1 or 2 children. And so it's really important for us that we made an evaluation area that would cover all of those. In each evaluation area in the toolkit, there's a dedicated section that outlines how it should be applied across different phases or age groups or types of educational provision. And the most important bit is when we do the planning call, so when we phone your school leaders, what we really want to understand is the structure and the context of the school, and that will include the context and structure of the governance of that school, but also how large the school is, anything that we need to know specifically about the community that it serves, anything to do with the type of school that is. I know there were some questions in there earlier about faith schools, for instance. So the planning call is where we really try and understand the context. And then what we will do then is we will use that information to really agree with school leaders the most appropriate focus, and also the type of inspection activities we're going to undertake, because as Claire's just said, the most important thing is for us not to put huge amount of pressure over and above what an inspection already does onto those leaders. So for instance, in a small school, we might want to understand how it's organised, staffing, mixed age classrooms, for instance. We're always going to be particularly sensitive to the demands on leaders' time. The head teacher might also be the SENCO, the DSL, responsible for early years, etc. So it's how we can best manage the inspection to make sure that the well-being of all involved is of paramount importance. Special schools, we recognise that published outcomes data either may not be available at all, or may not give us sufficiently detailed picture of the progress that young people are making. And so it's really important for us to understand a pupil's starting points and the progress that they have made over time. And in particular, for alternative provision, where alternative provision comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And what we're really interested in is how the placement has identified the individual needs of pupils and what they're putting in place to either mitigate any issues or to support that young person to make the most progress that they can. And it may be, for instance, that we'll review a sample of their agreements in relation to their placements, to really consider the progress that individuals are making. And there are a series of live webinars for different types of providers, as I mentioned earlier. And one of those is on special schools, and one of those is on alternative provision, or AP, if colleagues would find that useful. Okay.
Can I chip in on the back of that?
Of course you can, Claire.
Hey, Katie, can I do that?
Of course, yes.
I spotted a number of questions as well, sort of related to that, but particularly about sort of SEND funding. And I know that that's something that a lot of leaders and governors are particularly concerned about. Obviously, as we said at the start, I'm the Deputy Director for Inclusive Education at Ofsted. So you may or may not be familiar with our area SEND inspection framework, which is in my sort of patch as well. So it is a tricky one. Ofsted doesn't, it's not our role to comment specifically on funding, and that isn't something that we do. But I do recognise the frustration, that we do hear this, that people say, we're in a broken system and we're doing the best that we can. This is something with the new inspection framework on the education inspection side that we're really, really proud of, because it does take context into account. And that's where all of those, the preparation and planning call with leaders, and then the reflective sessions, leaders and governors are able to say to inspectors, well, actually, we have got some children here who ideally we think would be better served elsewhere, but we're doing the best. These are the things that we're doing. This is the impact that we're having. So inspectors will be able to take into account the challenges that you're facing. In terms of, I think I'd seen a question in there about, you know, how do we record that and sort of give it to Sir Martin Oliver to kind of pass back? And that's sort of slightly where the area send inspection framework comes in, because what that does is we go into local area partnerships and we go with education, we go with social care inspectors from Ofsted, and we also go with health inspectors from the Care Quality Commission, and we look at how a local area partnership is providing the appropriate education and care for children and young people with special educational needs or disabilities. And obviously across those inspections and the thematic reports that we do as well, we do gather a lot of evidence, and whilst we don't comment particularly on funding, we do then work very closely with the Department for Education, and we do share those messages to say these are the things that we see crop up again and again, both in our education inspections and also in our local area inspections as well. So it's something that we are aware of, that, you know, that we do try to do what we can. But yeah, I just wanted to pick that up as well, because it's quite related to the question that Helen's just answered there. But it really is something, like I say, that inclusion, we've got that focus on, you know, how are you sort of having impact and meeting the needs of the pupils that you've got. And like I said in my bit of the presentation, we're looking at those that you've got statutory obligations to, or you've got funding for. We're looking at pupil premium, socioeconomic disadvantage, special educational needs and disability. We're looking at those children who are known to or previously known to children's social care. But actually, this is the beauty of the context piece. We're actually looking for leaders to say, I know my setting, and actually there's a group of children in my school that I'm quite concerned about, and because of that, these are the things that we've put in place, and this is the impact that it's having. So it's really about leaders sort of telling us about their setting and their context and how they're kind of meeting need there.
Thank you very much, both of you, for that answer. I'm actually going to ask one more of our pre-prepared questions before moving over to the Q&A, particularly because it's also one of the most highly voted questions in the Q&A. It's about the role of the governance professional. So the Inspection Operating Guide for inspectors says that where a trust has employed a governance professional, you must meet them. But we've been hearing from some schools that have already been inspected, or from yourselves, that inspectors might actually only want to meet that person if they need clarification about governance structures. So can you give any assurance about the likelihood of these meetings taking place kind of routinely in inspections, and on what you might expect to be covered in that meeting with the trust governance professional?
Absolutely, yeah, I'll take that one. So, you know, we recognise that that's actually slightly misleading, and we don't want that to be the case. So we're in the process of actually updating the operating guide to make it really clear. But we can confirm that on inspection in an academy, the Board of Trustees is responsible for governance. So where there is a governance professional for the trust board, inspectors may wish to speak to them. That's absolutely fine, but it isn't a must. The professional must be spoken with if it will usefully clarify points for inspectors about the governance structure, add to the evidence, and or the trust wish inspectors to speak to a trustee and the governance professional. And those meetings should usually take place without the school and trust leaders present. So hopefully, but like I say, we will sort of be making those small amendments to the operating guide just to make sure that that's absolutely clear for colleagues.
Thank you, Claire. So now for the live Q&A, I think we can all see the most voted for question here is, what are you looking for from governors, especially on the day?
Do you want me to take that one, Claire?
Yeah.
I suppose, and this links to some of the questions about well-being and about this, you know, renewed, because this is, remember, is a renewed inspection framework. We haven't thrown everything out and started again. It's building on the education inspection framework, or the EIF. And what we're really looking for, I suppose, from both leaders and governors, is their understanding of their school, understanding of the pupils at that school and the community that that school is situated within and serves. Because we know, and we've inspected hundreds of schools, that every single school throughout the country is completely unique. So what we're looking for really from governors is their understanding of that, of understanding of what makes them, you know, what is the context of their particular school, and how that so there aren't going to be any trick questions. We're not trying to sort of trip people up or anything like that. We really want you to tell us about your school, tell us about how you work with leaders to make sure that you put children at the forefront of all the decisions that you make, and how you manage it. Now, within the in the toolkits, you will see that under leadership and governance, there's some clear questions, if you like, and they're not really questions, but they're statements that I read out earlier when we were going through the slides. And those are the sorts of things that we're going to ask you about. So it's not a test. Sometimes governors come into our meetings thinking that there's specific things that we want to know. We just want to know that you understand your school, its community, and that you're there to support the leadership team at your school, and that you're holding them to account to make sure that the quality of education that's provided for your children is of the highest quality. And that's really what we're doing. And there's some other questions I know about whether you can come to some of the reflection meetings. The reflection meetings really are for that two-way conversation between the school leaders and the inspection team. But in the feedback meeting at the end of day 2, as I said earlier, it's really important that you come along so that you can see how we arrived at the gradings that we did and what the next steps might be for your school, so that you can support leaders to make sure you address anything that needs addressing. So I hope that's helpful, Katie.
It is, yeah. And I think it also, just as a follow-up to that, one of our kind of the pre-asked questions was about the kinds of evidence or documentation you might like to see about how governing boards are working, what they're doing. Could you kind of give...
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I think it states is that we expect, governors' minutes, for instance, to be with us by the start of the inspection. And again, what we're looking for there is we're looking to see whether or not in your governors' meetings that you're having those robust conversations about the decisions that leaders are making, about making sure, I think it's in the operating guide, making sure that we can see, and that's quite an easy way for us to see it, to see meetings, minutes from meetings, or minutes of the Board of Trustees meetings, because what they do is they help us to see some of those conversations that you've had with the senior leadership team at the school, and how you support and challenge them to make sure that the quality and impact of things that you're doing have been, directed in the right way. We ask school leaders, for instance, about pupil premium strategy. And that one is something that we would want to discuss with you. And the other thing that we might talk to you about is how well you support senior leaders at the school in terms of their own well-being, because obviously that's an important element of this renewed framework moving forward.
Thank you. I can see that the next kind of most upvoted question is harking right back to the beginning on slide 6, which I think was the first of your slides, where you said you'd want to speak to governors about something in particular. Shall I flick back to there? Oh, that's...
I think it was about the taking context into account and the kind of collaboration. And I think actually Helen's probably covered a lot of that. So sorry if I sort of set hairs running there. All I meant really was actually, as we've got in the toolkit, we'll speak, inspectors will want to speak to governors and kind of find out, like Helen said, how do you work with the school? How do you support the leadership team? How do you hold the leadership team to account for that quality of education as well? So I think that's probably sort of all tied up in that, really.
Okay, thanks.
I wonder whether it might be useful, because I was just looking as well. I can see that there's the question there about the kind of top 3 pieces of advice. That's quite
go for that one.
And obviously that's sort of a bit related as well, isn't it, really? And I think probably what Helen and I would both say really is, you already do, I'm sure, know your school, that's why you're governors and why you're here and why you're committed to doing what you're doing. Actually, we don't want there to be any surprises. We want this to be a really transparent approach. So everything is in the operating guides and the inspection information documents and in the toolkits. I know there's a lot of reading there, but there are the specific leadership and governance evaluation areas. So just get to know the toolkit, have a little look at it, have a look at the operating guide, because it will give you a really clear sense of exactly what will happen on inspection, exactly the sort of things that inspectors are trying to gather evidence about in relation to leadership and governance. And hopefully it can help you to go into that inspection experience just feeling like, well, I do know my school and there's nothing hidden, because I've seen the list of the things that inspectors are going to try and gather evidence about. So I hope that's helpful and reassuring, but that would be my advice. Helen, is there anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, and I think the reason, and we don't expect you to read all of those documents, dip in and out by all means, but and they're there to be as transparent as we possibly can, because one of the things that came out of the big listen was very much about people saying they didn't know quite what we were going to ask on inspection or what we were going to be looking at, and I think this is what it does now. The thing to remember is that although it might feel like there are more evaluation areas than we had previously, because obviously we've gone from an overall effectiveness judgment to four judgments and now to grading, we're not looking at anything more than we ever looked at before. So it's not additional. We've always looked at behaviour, we've always looked at attendance, we've always looked at curriculum and teaching. We're looking at the same things we've always looked at, but what we're going to do, I think, is reflect that nuance, because the expected standard, the one in the middle, is clearly the one that all of those standards are based on statutory guidance, on things that we would expect all schools to be doing, and they're things that, so we're not expecting you or school leaders to do any more work or do anything additional, as long as you've always been meeting those statutory responsibilities. And if you start to read through, you'll recognise that most of them are things you're probably already doing.
Thank you for that, both of you again. I can see that the next few are kind of covering SEND funding that we've already spoken to. So I'm going to move us on to, this is probably going to be our last one. Could you explain the difference in the kind of the notice periods, the timescales for when a school might find out that they're going to be inspected under this new framework?
Do you want to take that one, Claire, or do you want me to do it?
I'm happy either way, don't mind. Yeah, do you want to...
Yeah, so in terms of the notification period, it's going to be the same as it has been in the past, and there are lots of reasons for that, and one of them being that we, clearly, Claire started the presentation by talking about the reason that we do this is because we all want collectively, don't we, the best thing for our children. Many of you probably became governors because of that very ideal of wanting the very best for every child. And when we talk to parents and carers, a lot of the time they say they want us to do no notice inspections. They want us just to turn up on the morning. And we're always very aware of that. And equally, we don't want to give schools a long period of notification, because what will happen then is that actually adds to anxiety and stress, because then they have to give up weekends and whatever else. So we're going with the same notification period that we had under the previous framework. We think that works well. It keeps it quite focused. There was a question in the chat about, when do I expect my next inspection? Some of you are sitting on all sorts of different types of gradings, and there is going to be a webinar with some slides that will explain that. And the reason for that is because, particularly in schools, because of the variety of different types of inspections we've had over the past few years, it is quite complex. And the easiest way to communicate that for individuals sitting on different types of judgments or grades is for it to be explained in a webinar. So there will be a webinar coming out which will explain different timings for when you will expect to be inspected over the next couple of weeks. And that takes you, Katie, to 1 minute before the end.
It does indeed. So it just remains then to thank all of you very much for giving up your time this evening, which I know is not easy as you're all volunteers or busy governance professionals. So thank you for coming along tonight. And many thanks also to our guests from Ofsted who have shared so much insight with us. If you do want to recap any of this, you'll get an email with the recording tomorrow. It'll also have a short feedback survey at the end, which we'd really appreciate you letting us know how you found this evening, whether you found it helpful. And finally, if you do need any more support in getting comfortable with the new framework, you'll find plenty of resources in the knowledge area of GovernorHub. So enjoy the rest of your evenings, and thank you all again for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, everyone.